Guys, we have seen a lot of changes in Destiny 2 this past year. Our subclasses taking the brunt of those changes. After Stasis and its wildly customizable aspect and fragment system was implemented with Beyond Light, the community desperately wanted the same system for our light-based subclasses, which back then really lacked a lot of choice. Pretty crazy that just over a year ago, we didn't have 3.0 subclasses. Gameplay was also much different back then, especially when it came to our builds. And ever since Witch Queen hit with Void 3.0, Season the Haunted with Solar 3.0, and Season the Plunder with Arc 3.0, our builds have only grown more complex, more fun, and much more deadly. Today, we're going to be looking at only the best, the most dangerous and deadliest builds to grace the game in 2022. Builds that are still leading the pack and are the best options for any Destiny 2 player heading into Lightfall. Now, we actually have 4 builds for you today, 1 for Titan, Hunter, and actually 2 for Warlock. No, I'm not a Warlock main, fellas. It just happened to work out this way, but this is going to be covering every single subclass in the game. So whether or not you like healing and scorching with Solar, constant ability spam with Arc, crowd control with Stasis, or debuffing the entire battlefield with Void, we've got you covered with the best builds so you can carry your entire fire team directly on your back come Lightfall. Now, each build we go over today, we've directly covered in the past, going even more in depth with each of them in the respective videos. We'll have each of those videos shown up at the top of the screen when we talk about them, as well as have them linked in the video description if you want to check them out separately. Now, some of these builds use seasonal mods from the season that they were built. So in this video, each build we go over will have 0 seasonal mods. So they'll be just as deadly come Lightfall. Granted, they may even be better if you're watching this during a future season, and there's actually seasonal mods that buff these builds up even more. Alongside those links will be a dim link, so you can easily equip each of these builds without any hassle. We'll also have build cards up on the screen, so you can pause the video and equip what you need for yourself if you like. Now, we won't be diving into stat distributions for these builds, considering max resilience, it's always the way to go these days. Granted, that may be getting nerfed, but until resilience is actually nerfed, you always want to be rocking tier 10 for every PvE build, period. Now let's get into it. Starting with Stasis, this is of course a long-running build, our Warlock Stacy build. That's right, Stacy puts out, fellas, day and night. We've been using this build for so long because it's quite literally the best crowd control in the game. This build pairs our Stasis Warlock with the exotic Osmiomancy gloves, which actually gives us an additional cold snap grenade. We then use Bleak Watcher aspect, which will let us convert our grenades into Stasis turrets, which will slow and freeze targets for us. Osmiomancy also gives us 2 grenades, therefore 2 turrets, and you can chuck them back to back if you want. Doesn't matter because with this build, you almost always have a turret ready to go. Now, we've had 4 at once before, and it's possible to pull off with this build, and it's quite nuts. And if you add on Glacial Harvest aspect, where freezing targets create Stasis shards, these shards will replenish a small amount of melee energy. But that's not why we're using this aspect. Instead, we're pairing it up with the mod Elemental Shards, which will make those Stasis shards count as Stasis well. You add on 3 firepower mods and Elemental Charge, and you've got a very steady stream of Stasis turrets to throw down in any situation whenever you need them. Picking up a Stasis shard will make you charge with light ×2, thanks to Elemental Charge and Elemental Shards. And throwing a grenade, or a turret in our case, will proc firepower and use 1 stack of charge with light, granting you a large chunk of that grenade energy right back. Are you seeing the synergy, guys? It's nasty. Throw another turret and you'll get another chunk of energy because you'll still got that 1 stack of charge with light, on top of having another turret ready to go, just like that. We've also got fragments that make this loop even easier. Whisper Shards will give you a boosted grenade recharge rate when you shatter any Stasis crystal, so even more grenade regeneration. Whisper of Durance will cause any slow effect you create to last longer, including slow from each of your turrets. Whisper of Conduction will make nearby Stasis shards track to you, so you don't even have to worry about picking them up. And Whisper of Torment, which will give you even more grenade energy every time you take damage. One of the best things about this build is that it requires very little thinking. There's not a lot that you have to do to make this build work. You just play the game. Use your grenades as turrets as often as possible, and everything else will do things for you. It just works, guys.
It's not, I'm not kidding.
You're able to play support in the crowd control space, constantly freezing everything, slowing everything, creating Stasis shards for other players, creating safe getaways, freezing eye-out targets for easy DPS. This is a killer build that we don't see going away anytime soon. And this is fun to use in any content, and actually a great choice for hard content like Grandmaster Nightfalls, which is coming very soon. We've actually used it multiple times in our GM guides. Granted, we've used things like Eye of Another World, which is also a very good exotic to pair here, but Osmiomancy is fantastic for this build. Anything with lots of ads, this build succeeds at locking down. On top of that, if you pair it with things like Witherhoard, this makes this build even more potent. Freeze them, drop a Witherhoard shot. Ads are literally stuck in the pools of your Witherhoard, taking that damage over time. It's perfect synergy. Now, who knows? Maybe Strand will be the crowd control king when Lightfall drops, but it's got its work cut out, guys. Because if it wants to take crowd control from our precious Stacy build, oh, it's got to put out. Next is Arc. Guys, it's no surprise. Arc Titan is literally the Lord of Thunder, going 2 seasons strong. If you like lots of damage and constant ability uptime, this is the build for you. Ability uptime is king right now in Destiny. And sure, every subclass has a build or multiple builds that allows you to have almost endless ability spam, but none are as deadly or as fun as Arc Titans. This might be the strongest and most reliable build across the game. Now, when we found out how much damage storm grenades were doing week 1 of Season of the Plunder, we threw this build together as quickly as we could, and no matter the nerfs Bungie threw at it, it has still stayed around. Now, if you frequent our channel, you probably know this build by now. This build pairs Arc Titans with, of course, Heart of Inmost Light and storm grenades, and the gameplay loop couldn't be easier. Spam abilities, rinse and repeat. We'll go over exactly what's happening in this build, but that's basically what it comes down to at the end of the day. The long and short of it is that Heart of Inmost Light is the GOAT exotic for Titans. I'm gonna be one sad Titan main if this exotic actually gets a nerf. But essentially, guys, every time you use an ability with Heart of Inmost Light equipped, it empowers your other 2 abilities, giving them increased damage and regeneration. Use 2 abilities and it empowers them ×2, giving you even more damage and regeneration, so on and so forth. This exotic is so good, and you don't even need anything else, but when we start to add in aspects and fragments and mods, it gets insane. Touch of Thunder is the main aspect you need here. This is going to make your storm grenades roam the battlefield, periodically firing bolts of lightning beneath it at enemies. Now, at the start of Season 19, Bungie tried to nerf our storm grenades by reducing the Touch of Thunder storm grenade duration from 5 seconds to 4 seconds, and the Spark of Magnitude added duration from 2 seconds to now 1.5. And while this is technically a nerf, we're really not feeling it. This build spams abilities so much that the nerf is almost unnoticeable. Try again, Bungie. Actually, please don't. Speaking of Spark of Magnitude, yeah, put it on for this build. We want those storm grenades lasting as long as possible. You also want Spark of Shock so that storm grenades will jolt targets, which will chain lightning to surrounding enemies. You also get your choice of melee and class abilities. Now, personally, in harder content, I like the Thunderclap melee because that keeps me at range. You also have your Thruster class ability added alongside Arc 3.0 that can be spammed quite often and is very usable for this build as it's empowering your other abilities constantly. Granted, you can still rock a barricade. Now, Seismic Strike, if you're willing to close the gap, does blind targets in an AoE effect when making contact. So again, between those abilities, it's completely up to you. Now, as far as mods go, it's all about ability regeneration. Throw on an Elemental Ordnance mod and Bountiful Wells to generate multiple arc wells on each grenade kill. Seeking wells will make every generated well seek to you. Ashes the assets will give you a ton of super regeneration on grenade kills. Since you'll be throwing storm grenades left and right, you're going to be getting your super really quickly, which we do suggest rocking Thunder Crash here. You can throw on other ability regeneration mods like Bolstering, Detonation, and Bomber. And that's pretty much it. You're set. You just spam your abilities. Heart of Inmost Light will do its thing. All the elemental wells you create will track to you, feeding into more ability regeneration. And that's really it. Our original build paired all of this with Thunderlord, which actually has intrinsically overload rounds and a catalyst that refills the mag every time it creates lightning strikes. But granted, you don't have to use that this season. You may even want to try Grand Overture with this build, considering it got a massive buff in its missile damage. We did DPS tests a number of weeks ago. Grand Overture is putting in work. And matter of fact, I even used it against some champions, and it's crazy, like in master content, and it's crazy how quickly it can shred a champion. So unless Heart of Inmost Light actually gets a nerf, fingers crossed, you're going to be seeing this build everywhere post Lightfall. Next on our list, Void. Void Hunters, you guys are disgusting this season. We recently made the best Hunter solo build for Season 19, and unless Gerfalcon's Harbor gets a nerf, it will continue to be one of the best DPS, ad clear, and survivability builds in the game. Now for PvE, Deadfall is the obvious pick for your super, and now that Divinity has actually been nerfed, Tether is a very solid pick for boss phases for that 30% debuff. Pair this up with Gambler's Dodge, Snare Bomb, Vortex or Magnetic Grenades for the rest of our abilities, And for your aspects, Vanishing Step is the key for constant invisibility. Stylus Executioner for the same reason, since most targets we fight will be under the effects of void debuffs because of Gerfalcon's most recent buff. This now grants us volatile rounds every time we come out of Invis. It's nuts. And I know everybody was complaining about Gerfalcon getting a PvP nerf, but the trade-off here for PvE, it's so worth it. Now for the fragments, use Echo of Undermining to apply the weaken debuff with our grenades, Echo of Harvest to generate orbs of power on targets that we defeat with precision damage, Echo of Starvation to grant us Devour after picking up those orbs, which by the way is extremely good. Devour is almost always exclusive to Warlock Void builds, so being able to tap into Devour Hunter is so good for that survivability. Also, Echo of Persistence to extend the duration of all Void buffs applied to us. Now when Lightfall arrives, the best weapons to pair with this build may actually change. For now though, surprisingly, even though a lot of people wrote it off, the Velis X, which is the ritual weapon for this season, is really good here. It's long range, easy to acquire by hitting rank 16 with either the Vanguard, Crucible, or Gambit, and it has rolls that are fantastic, including combinations like Repulsor Brace and Golden Tricorn, which grants constant shields and damage boosts to our primary weapon. It's stupid good, guys. We pair this up with Witherhoard and Weaken Clear for that damage over time and a 15% debuff to enemies as well, which was incredible. Now for mods, throw on Reaping Wellmaker, 2 Wells of Utilities, and Font of Might. This will constantly feed us Void Wells on dodge, buffing our Void weapon damage and giving us our dodge energy back. Harmonic Siphon and Installation also contribute to that regeneration because of all the orbs of light we'll be generating. Now I know some of these artifact mods are not going to be present next season, but I do have to bring this up because again, it's such a good solo build. And if you want to see our individual video on this, again, down below in the description will be a link to it. But this season we also have Solo Operative for a free 15% damage buff when solo. With that being said though, I know it's going away next season. This build is still going to be a fantastic solo build. It also works just as well with the team. And again, you don't have to use Velis. There are other Repulsor Brace weapons out there that you can utilize. Velis is just a great option for everyone as it's very easy for everyone to get this season. Now the gameplay loop is extremely simple. Simply dodge, shoot enemies, pick up Void Wells, and that's literally it for most content. But if you want to get into all the specifics and when to use your abilities, how to maximize the build's damage, I do highly recommend watching our dedicated video on this as it shows how to get that 723% damage buff. Now finally, Solar. Guys, we saved this one for last, but the sheer amount of damage this build puts out is insane. We have a Warlock build, codename Star Class. This was originally made during Season the Haunted when Solo 3.0 was introduced. Now this build takes Warlock's fire magic to the next level, as well as provides support to your fire team and a way of healing and empowering buffs. Now when we're talking Solar and the best class to pair with Solar, Warlocks are going to be our #1 answer every single time because Well of Radiance is so strong and of course so useful, especially in in-game content. Well of Radiance might be the best super in the game for difficult content just in general. And considering how bad Dawnblade got nerfed inside of PvE, Warlocks just give up on it. Rock well, man. Pour one out for your fellow Dawnblades. Now Star Class also makes use of empowering rifts instead of healing rifts and fusion grenades. Both of these are used because of our exotic armor piece, Starfire Protocol. This exotic actually gives us an additional fusion grenade charge and makes them recharge from a powered weapon damage. It also grants us rift energy on fusion grenade kills, so when we're standing in our empowering rifts or Well of Radiance and getting weapon kills, we get fusion grenade regeneration. And when we get a fusion grenade kill, we get our empowering rift right back. You see this energy here? Guys, I literally crutched on this day 1 of the duality dungeon. It's so good. So good, in fact, that you'll be able to legit spam fusion grenades over and over. You have an endless supply, especially if you drop things like a Witherhoard shot onto an enemy. As it's doing damage over time and you're sitting in your empowering rift, this is counting as empowering damage, therefore feeding you grenade energy. Now, these fusion grenades will also be buffed thanks to Touch of Flame aspect, which makes them explode twice, and they'll be heavily scorching enemies. Even more so when we add on Ember of Ashes, which lets us deal more scorch stacks, making ignitions happen even more often. And guess what? These ignitions will also feed into our grenade energy if we equip Ember of Blistering. You have constant solar damage and constant explosions taking place. It only makes sense to equip mods like Explosive Wellmaker, Elemental Ordnance, and Bountiful Wells to lean into the chaos and fire that you're spreading. So now you'll spawn solar wells when you rapidly defeat targets with explosive damage. And when you defeat targets with fusion grenades, and those wells will stack with all the other ability regeneration that you already have going on. Acid Assets also works wonders here too, providing great super regeneration on each grenade kill. And you can imagine how quickly you'll be getting your Well of Radiance back. Tagging on Seeking Wells for that ease of use. And lastly, Well of Life to also grant you health regeneration when you pick up solar wells. By the way, Wither Horde, for those that didn't know, can also generate solar wells when you have Explosive Well Maker on. Not sure why it does that, but we'll take it, Bungie. Now, once again, like most of these builds, the gameplay loop is simple. Use your Empowering Rift, fire off a Wither Horde shot and fusion grenades while standing in it. Wither Horde damage will recharge your fusion grenades, and your fusion grenades will recharge your Empowering Rift. Wither Horde and fusion grenades and those kills will generate solar wells, which will provide you with more ability regeneration and some health regeneration. And guys, you just simply have to rinse and repeat this process. You've got your Well of Radiance for whenever you need it, which by the way, makes you empowered, allowing you to take advantage of the build while inside the well too. It's a very good build that really takes advantage of what Solo 3.0 brought to the game, while also maintaining that support class for your fire team. So guys, those are our 4 deadliest builds for 2022. I know there's a lot of other builds out there. We've even made a ton of other build videos, but these are so simple to me. Again, we have dim links down below. And if you're curious in sharing more builds or even discovering more builds, we do have a Discord. We have an entire build channel dedicated to sharing builds. Guys, feel free to come by over there. Folks are constantly sharing things out, trying to find that next potent meta build. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.